So let's go ahead and finish up part 2 of chapter 7 for development strategies. So where we are in this process is talking about the idea of creating user applications and getting some ideas and some requirements as we do that. So whether we're developing in-house, out of house, working with a third-party vendor to develop, whatever the case may be, even reviewing the current, say, opportunities within a vendor, an existing piece of software, we would look at these things. We would look at, an example of a user application. Certainly, one of the most popular, Microsoft Office, still holds worldwide market share for word processing, spreadsheets, presentations, email collaboration, you name it. So user interface, well, those are the screens, the commands, the controls, the features that enable the user to interact more efficiently. If you go out and do a little research, you'll find that Google now has a very huge standard. They're really trying to standardize the development of Android applications, and thus they've created, sort of rules around that development. What a button should look like, what kind of functionality it has, where it should be placed on the page, so that we create more of a consistent user interface across the applications that users would use on their Android phones. So, help desk and information center, screen and report generators, read-only properties, of course, to protect data. Sometimes we want users to be able to get to data, but not necessarily consume it in a way of saving it, manipulating it, etc. We just want them to be able to read and review it, depending on their position and security level within the company. So, whether the decision to develop software in-house requires more participation, of course it does, from systems analysts than outsourcing or choosing a commercial package. There tends to be more work, but let's be careful. A lot of times the systems that we purchase third party aren't implemented well, don't work for our business because we didn't do that same level of planning, to figure out, does that software meet our needs? And we'll talk about some of the ways we do that here in a minute. So, evaluations, selection of alternatives, certainly not a simple process. We just want to make sure we don't just get focused on the fact of, well, this one's cheaper and seems to do the same thing. So, a lot of times analysts, whether they build, they may not build, they may not be hired by a company to build, but they're hired by a company to bring in their expertise of analysis to define, what are the business objectives that the system alleviates, that will meet the requirements. What alternatives are there? What are our competitive natures or our competitive strategies that we just simply need in a system, because that's where we make a difference to our customers or rise above the competition. So as we talk about analysis, definitely refer to your text, refer to the Systems Analyst Toolkit. Payback analysis, for example, determines how long it takes an information system to pay for itself through reduced costs, increased benefits, whatever. Now, of course, if these are direct tangible costs, those are easy to find. If we're talking about intangible costs, we may not be able to really convert those into tangible assets of implementing a system until the system is in place and we actually can go back and do an audit. So as much as once we've implemented the system, it's up, it's running, it's live, as they say, our process is not yet done. We both, in all cases, want to go back and audit. And if we said there was a return or a payback analysis of 1 year, and after that year, we want to go see, did we get what we expected? Did we get that return on investment at a level to pay for the system? Perhaps even we find out we got an increased return on investment, and what we thought was a 12-month ROI turned out to be an 8-month ROI. We want to know those things as well. Now, if you've taken any kind of business or accounting, you understand what net present value is. It's the total value of benefits minus the total value of costs. Okay, and those are brought back to present costs. So remember, as inflation takes place, we want to bring those back to today's dollars and the value of today's dollars, so that we can really do a comparison and analyze the value of investing in a new system, or the value that a new system would produce over the next 5 years based on today's dollars. So Cost benefit analysis checklist. You can go through this, things to consider. Identify all costs. That can be very difficult. Consider future growth and need for scalability. So, are we expecting to have to increase our hardware purchase or increase our software licensing because we're utilizing the system more in the third year, for example? We want to include those in the total cost of ownership. Licensing, support fees, transaction fees, all of those, can add up to a great deal of financial stress or financial profit onto a system that we implement. So study the results, prepare a report for management, use those charts and graphs in Excel. You'll do a great job. So acquisition process, well, we evaluate the information system requirements. So you see, this is the same whether we're going to build a system, outsource, look at a third-party vendor, whatever. We have to look at requirements. We have to look at what key features we need in the system. Is it network? Is it web? What's our volume going to be through the system? What's growth look like? What's scalability? And once we do all that, we can prepare a request for proposal or quotation. So an RFP, basically what we would do is we would go out to a vendor, and we might even use an RFP in the aspect of development, a third-party outsourced development. We're going to go out and give them the information that details the requirements, the functionality, the security, everything we need in a system. And they're going to take that and come back and say, our system meets this requirement by X, this one by Y, this one by C. And if they're really honest, gee, ours doesn't do this, but that's a great feature that we might consider adding, or that's actually in our prototype development in our next system, and we guarantee you're going to see that within the system. So here's an example of some online order processing, sort of an estimated growth, based on existing procedures. So we can see current level based on existing, and then if we do some sort of website, once the website's operational, this is what our expectation is. So we can look at customers, orders. We can then look at increased revenue by implementing the new website in this case, so we can see what kind of revenue we're going to get, and then offset the cost of building that new website by saying, if we build it and they do come and we do reach these numbers, and of course it's sales and marketing who should give us these numbers, not IT. And say, if we reach these numbers, the system would have a return on investment of X. How long would it take? So, RFP master template, you'll find these online, by the way, as well. A lot of great Excel spreadsheets that help you walk through to create a request for proposal. And this again can be a proposal to compare a vendor's software with our needs, build the software to our needs, utilize a software as a service, and or even build it in-house. So we can look at all these different things, to find a best vendor. Now, in this case, for the project, I'm just asking you to find a vendor and sell that vendor as the right system for personal trainer. But if we were doing this, we would start out, we would want multiple vendors, we would compare their pricing, we would compare all of the features and functionality, we would look at all the RFPs, stick them on a single spreadsheet, who won this category, who won that category, etc. And then of course we want that all in a contract if we do purchase, so that they're guaranteed to hold up their end of the bargain. They didn't just sell us something, they committed to giving us what we've asked for and what we're going to pay for. So step 2, identify potential vendors or outsourcing options. That's pretty simple. How can we start that? Do a Google search, folks, just like you did with the personal trainer project. 3, evaluate alternatives. So let's be careful not to bandwagon and get stuck on the flash of a sales presentation. Oh, that's the best product for us. Let's just drop what we're doing and go that way. Let's make sure we do an educated analysis, that we document, that we have some testing, that we go out and find or create benchmarking in the performance of the system, confirm that what we think we're going to get is what we're going to get. Unfortunately, there's no Carfax for software applications, but you will find a lot of information online, as to companies that have been successful and companies that may have been challenged. As we go through the process here on campus, a quick Google search found that a couple colleges have really struggled and have not had successful implementations with one of the top 2 softwares that we're looking at implementing here on campus. So that prompted us to go out and ask more questions and see if we could get to the bottom of why, because sometimes it's not the vendor, it's the people that are implementing the software that make it difficult. So just some things to consider. Step 4, perform that cost benefit analysis. So let's do our best to calculate a total cost of ownership. Then look at how revenue or maybe savings might be impacted. So, if the system costs $5,000 a year, but it's going to save our company $10,000 a year, then we can calculate, how quickly the software would pay for itself. So, when you purchase software, what are you buying? Well, if you had my 120 class, you certainly understand this from that class. You are not buying rights to the software. You're leasing the software. You're renting it. You're buying the ability to use it, not necessarily the ability to modify it, the ability to do anything else, but use that software as it was intended, in the way it was intended, with the features and functionalities that were built into it. So if we need to do anything else, we're going to need to look at modifying that. And then, of course, support. I see a lot of folks that go out, they buy a computer with a 1-year warranty, and 2 years in, it fails. Well, what's the cost of that failed computer? Well, you now have no warranty, whereas in a lot of cases, a couple $100 buys you a 4-year warranty, covers next day replacement, and thus we don't have to lose any downtime. So let's just say that I lose my computer for a day, and I make $30 an hour. Well, a quick calculation, that's $240 a day on an 8-hour shift. That's not something I'm willing to give up. If I suddenly had to wait a week for a computer and was unproductive or have my productivity affected by not having that computer, seems pretty cheap to spend a few $100s on a warranty that would give me next day replacement parts or next day replacement, for that matter, of the computer. So all of these things need to definitely be looked at. So finally, step 5, we prepare that recommendation. This may be for a single system. We should also, though, submit alternatives so that we demonstrate that we've done the work expected to choose or pick a system that we've picked. We may compare the 3 systems. We may do advantages, disadvantages, pros, cons, costs, you name it. We may even compare functionality of 2 to 3 systems, present that to management, and in some cases simply let management make the decision. We don't necessarily need to go in to sell the system. Finally, step 6, implement that solution. So as we talk about total cost of ownership, let's not forget there are costs in user training, in configuring, training the users that are going to use it, implement it, testing it, make sure it's going to work for our organization. Those are all costs. If the company is going to be down, say, for business one day as we do the switchover, that's a new cost to the system. So keep that in mind. If we're pulling an employee away from what they make money for and we're having to invest in training for them, that's another cost to the system. And then, of course, real quick, let me go back. The idea of converting data files. A lot of times we can't get 100% conversion from our old system to our new. If there's existing data that wasn't converted that needs to be put into the new system, there can be a cost in converting it. There can be a cost in entering that data into the system. I've been involved with a few different implementations where there was so much value in getting that old information into the system that we had work parties where people were paid time and a half to come in and do data entry of data from the old system to the new. So systems requirements document, also called software requirements specification, depending on how we're going. It is like a contract. This can be part of the request for proposal. This can be what happens after the request for proposal, but it's a formalized document that says, this is what we are looking for. These are the alternatives. This is what this said the system should do. We bring this to management, and again, letting them make a decision. Now, sometimes you'll be asked to provide a presentation to management. Be careful as you do this to try to stay as unbiased as you can. This can be difficult when you've spent weeks of your own time and effort to figure out what is the best product for the company. You're excited about it, but let management make the decision. They will ask for your expertise, and you can give that, but be careful not to bandwagon on something that looks really shiny but may not run as well as it looks. So if that makes sense. So allow time for discussion, questions, all of this stuff seems pretty clear to me. Obtain a final decision from management or agree on a timetable in the next step. Remember, the decision may be to not make a decision. That is a decision. So we may table something because we've got other priorities going on. As we make the presentation to management, depending on their decision, your next task as a system may be to implement an outsourcing, develop in-house, purchase the software, or like it says right there, stop all further work. That is a possibility, folks. And let's not forget that sometimes that's the best thing we can do, is step away, wait for technology to improve, whatever the case may be, get the funding we need, find the time we need to do it right, and step back in. So preparing for systems design. So systems design requirements requires accurate documentation. All of the stuff we've done needs accurate, clear, and concise documentation. And for some of you this term, I've had to challenge you to reduce that documentation, reduce the wordiness, give me just what I need, when I need it, how I need it, because folks aren't going to read through a bunch of fluff to get the information they need. This is why on a lot of reports, there's a thing called an executive summary. And basically, you might have a 50-page report or a 50-page systems analyst documentation presenting a system, and you need a 1-page summary of that for executives to read because they don't have time to read through your whole detailed information. They may or may not do that once the project has been approved. So logical, physical design, talking about those charts, graphs, all of that stuff. So as we consider now, we have a great opportunity to look at Web 2.0, but let's be careful not to get stuck in the web. Just because it's where things are being done does not mean it's the right way for it to be done for the company you're working for or consulting for. Keep your minds open, do the work that's needed, educate yourself, do the research, present the data, as unbiased as you can, and allow management to make that decision. Then you implement, and then finally, don't forget to go back and audit. Audit the work to find out, did the results we expect, were those produced by the system? Were they better than we thought? Were they worse than we thought? Either way, we don't know unless we ask those tough questions. If you have any further questions, let me know. Have a great day.